Okay, now I'm going to try doing a pen drawing in a journal that I've used before, but not for a while, just to compare the paper. So this is the Strathmore Visual Journal, and they come in all sorts of different Strathmore papers, and this is the one that is actually Bristol Smooth. And this is definitely one of my favorite papers to use Micron pen on. So I've done some alcohol marker drawings in here also, but this one gives you a good example of what I've done before in here. But it's been a while, so I'm going to do a different drawing in here this time. And we're going to see how it feels in comparison to that other notebook. This is a good illustration right here of how shading is really everything. Like I put all these lines in and you can't tell what you're looking at for 90% of this. But I promise it will make sense once I shade it. okay, I've definitely hit that put the pen down, step away, you're done, just don't touch it anymore point. But really, I actually, one of the things I like about doing Inktober is that there's a time limit. You have to get it done and posted on that day. And you can't just like sit there and obsess over it forever, which when I don't have a deadline can be a problem with something like this because I can always find another thing to fix and work on. And this one was hard, partially just because it's a lot of detail. It's just a big enough space. This is like a A5 size notebook. It's just big enough that you can really spend a while on this. Like this took me several hours over several days. And of course I thought I was going to do something simple and then I decided to just kind of go crazy with it. So I'll talk about some of the things I ran into here. One of the things that was difficult was that these flowers are all white flower, and these ones too. They're all white flowers. And in pen, that is really hard to do because you're either in a situation where you just have like a few lines and it looks very cartoonish, or you're kind of having to darken it in order to be able to add any kind of shading and texture. Thinking about it now, one thing I could have probably done was used like a smaller nib pen for those. So I used the size 1 Micron, but maybe I could have tried like the 005. And that might have helped with that. But, I also like another thing I did on this entire drawing was that I added a lot of different textures and a lot of hatching going in different directions just as kind of an experiment. I was really trying to play around with different ideas just to see what it would look like. And it actually kind of turned out how I would hope in the way that it kind of created a lot of energy and movement because things were going in all sorts of different directions. So it's like a really complex line drawing. And so, for instance, like these flowers have very smooth petals, but I added texture to them to make them more interesting to look at. Same with this vase. This vase is actually like a matte finish, a smooth matte finish, and I created something a little different here. And then this part was complicated because in the photo, it's actually kind of blurred out because it's farther away. And I wanted to still de-emphasize it some way or another in here, but couldn't really quite decide how to do it. And I ended up just kind of making them a little darker just to make them blend into the background a little bit more. And I think it sort of works, but if I had to go back and do again, I'm wondering if I would actually maybe even make it kind of like how I did the rest of the background where it's all just hatched and there aren't any hard lines. I don't know. So, and then this swirly thing is actually, it's a candlestick that I have. I have like these tall candlesticks by my window and I just thought it looked cool, so I kept it in the picture. This flower was a real struggle. So in the photo I have, it's actually quite blown out. And so I was kind of trying to create more detail in it to make it more interesting. And it still just didn't look right. And I pulled Bill over and I was like, does this look weird to you? And, he was still kind of seeing what I was seeing. So I knew I needed to go in there and do something different. So I eventually actually just kind of made the whole thing darker so that I could actually have more definition. And then once I did that, I kind of had to do that to these flowers too. So that's how it ended up that way. And this is actually just a regular red rose that's dying. So in the photo, it's a darker color than everything else. But in here, I really wanted to leave those white highlights on it because I want it to be the focal point of the picture. And I think that works. I think it's kind of cool. So I'm pretty happy with this, and I learned some things doing it. And that is really the point of doing things in a sketchbook. So I'm kind of happy about that. And I really do feel like I need to just walk away because I still feel really compelled to like mess with this little thing and that little thing here. I keep seeing all these imperfections. And I think, at a certain point, you just need to call it done. So I think that's what I'm going to do. Now, as far as assessing this notebook for drawing compared to this notebook, I noticed that, since I came back to the Bristol paper and haven't used it in a while, it is still very, very smooth. So this is a smooth notebook, but it's got a little bit more coarse of a finish on there. I would call this like a vellum finish. It's similar to the Strathmore Mixed Media 400 tone paper that I use a lot in that kind of finish. So it's got a little bit more texture than this one does. This one is so smooth, it's like ice skating. that's my analogy for that. Whenever I'm using the pen, I have shaky hands and they're worse at certain times of the day, and it can sometimes be kind of an issue working on this really smooth paper because it really does show every single little thing you do. And I mean, you can't make any mistakes. You can't accidentally drop your pen on the paper. You can't like be startled. You have to really pay attention. So I actually take a lot of breaks when I draw on this Bristol paper because it requires so much concentration. I'm trying not to be really, really tense while I'm working. So let's see. Now I'll show you, it doesn't show through with the Micron pen at all. I do notice when I use like Tombow alcohol markers, for instance, it will sometimes bleed through, but these don't bleed through, which is nice. And they don't, once they're dry, I haven't had any problems with them smearing either. So I'm going to kind of do a close-up shot now, and I will show you, you can kind of get a comparison of what the lines look like and the differences between these two. But honestly, like, both of them were a good experience. This one's nice because it's white paper, and if you want that high contrast, white paper is going to be better. But neither one is bad. Now, one thing I had pointed out earlier about the Art Creation Sketchbook is that there were not shades of black available to me. Like, once I made everything black, it was black. And this Bristol paper is the same way. That ink really doesn't like soak into that paper. It pretty much rests on top. So once you get a full layer of black, you're not going to make that any blacker than black. It's just there. So the next sketchbook that I'm going to test with Micron pen is going to be the Mixed Media Visual Journal from Strathmore. Although I am not sure what I'm going to draw yet, so we're going to have to wait and see.